Just needing the one from
It's there.
El YouTubo.
That's not how you say YouTube.
Well, it's how I just said it. Okay, it says it's on there too. Alrighty, welcome in everyone to this episode of the Batfoot Podcast. Got Damien, Matt, and David back with you today. We're going to recap kind of a couple of the games that we highlighted last week. The insane doubleheader that we had happen today that about killed Matt, and then we will talk about and preview the 4 wildcard series that we have happening starting tomorrow, Tuesday through Thursday, and just give you each of our predictions for all of that. But before we get into all that, we're going to save Matt suffering a little bit longer. David, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, I didn't have any chaotic baseball to watch today. I just watched from that lens of there to enjoy, and oh my, there was much to enjoy. So I was quite satiated. I feel bad for the Diamondbacks fans as they will be missing the playoffs after a World Series run last year. That means both of the World Series teams from last year not in the playoffs. That's a pretty surprising outcome for this season. I don't think we would have expected that, but
You know when that last time that happened?
nope, not off the top of my head.
17 years ago.
Marlins, Yankees? No, it's been longer. Oh boy, I can't do
That
math.
was the last time.
I was told there would be no math.
Well, I just happened to be listening
What year?
on the broadcast today, and they said it was 17 years ago that since the last team that were in the World Series both didn't make the
Yeah.
playoffs. It was 17 years ago.
Do we know what
I don't-
teams
It was
that was?
it was 2007.
Oh, there you go.
All right,
Okay.
they said the year on the Braves broadcast. It was the Cardinals and the Red Sox. Wait,
Okay.
no. Sorry, not the Red Sox. It was the Cardinals and the
Tigers?
Tigers. Yep,
Tigers.
Cardinals and Tigers. 2007.
There you go. So, other than that, it's good. Been to some concerts. Those have been fun. I've had a good time. How you doing, Damien? I'll pass to you before we kick to Matt because he's doing away.
Yeah, we're still just trying to let him collect his thoughts, really, because wow, what a couple games that was. In my view, I was hoping for chaos as like, hey,
Oh,
I'm
you
just a
got
baseball
chaos.
fan. I'm just a baseball fan. Like, this is just awesome, right? Like, if one team gets swept, that the Diamondbacks make it. If not, then the both teams there make it and stuff. But I was sweating out my dynasty fantasy championship too on the middle of all of this, which just happened to be chaos ensuing on top of that. So I had a little bit more to worry about. I ended up losing. It's not too anything, but it was just total. It was so much fun. And at one point I was watching it, and then I had to stop watching it, and all of a sudden I look back and it's like 6 runs have been scored, and I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, absolute pandemonium. So fun to watch as a baseball fan, but overall it's been fun. I mean, the Dodgers did what they did, finished with best record in baseball again. As that's pretty fun. But Matt, we'll finally get a little bit of your thoughts here before we start breaking down these series, or the 2 games at least. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing okay. I just want to say it's what a great time of year here. You know, it's the playoff time where, you know, Damien and I can give you our biased thoughts on what's going to happen in the postseason, and then David can give us his objective thoughts on what's going to happen in the postseason. You know, as has been the case for most years here recently. But
Shots fired.
but,
Man,
yeah.
come on, I'm already down.
Hey, I have one thing going for me. All of my teams are terrible. Auburn chokes away double-digit leads in the 4th quarter. The Dolphins are losing to the worst team in the NFL that's not the Dolphins, the Tennessee Titans, who, by the way, my brother's a fan of, so I'm already pissed off about that. I mean, all my teams stink. They're all chokers. And I have one team that actually made the playoffs, even though they're about to get swept in the wild card round. And I'm gonna talk my talk, so that's gonna happen. But yeah, it was a crazy day. I mean, I was in the office today at work. I work from home part of the time, but today I was in the office and I was watching on my phone in Game 1, and I was joking with my coworkers that I was gonna watch the game on my phone, and there was a likelihood that the phone was going to be hurled across the room and break against the wall. And I was joking, and then It almost happened, but then I almost spiked it out of excitement, and then I almost threw it again. But I ended up not. My phone's okay. But that was crazy. Game 1 of that doubleheader was nuts. Game 2, I was actually at the gym during Game 2. I was like, I'm just gonna have to like do my normal afternoon stuff because I'm like not gonna. I just can't take this game. And the Braves did everything in their possibility, anything possible to give me a heart attack. I looked down at my watch and when I was working out, it's in the 8th inning. My heart rate was like 180, and I wasn't even working out that hard. I was like pissed off already. So it's been a long day. I'm watching one game of do or die baseball is bad enough. Watching 2 games of do or die baseball in one day for your team is nuts. But we're here. We made it in. Just like the time that we barely made it in, last time we barely made it in, world champs. But that's probably not going to happen because we don't have any pitchers left. They're all arms are going to fall off, and I mean our team's batters, all their arms, legs, whatever, have fallen off already, and now it's time for the pitcher's turn. So we'll get into it here though, and preview the wild card, and it's that time of year, so it's good. It's good.
Yeah, so just real quick, we wanted to kind of talk. Matt and I highlighted a couple series the past week or so. So I just wanted to just give an update, not game by game, just kind of what happened overall and what ended up being. We talked about the big Dodgers-Padres series. Dodgers ended up taking 2 of 3 there, clinching the number 1 seed and the National League West. The Orioles ended up clinching their playoff berth in the wild card in one of those games against the Yankees, and kind of went from there. Houston, I think, took 2 of 3 from Seattle, kind of knocked Seattle out of the playoff contention. I think they ended up 2 games back in the wild card there. And then what was the other one we talked about? I totally forgot about it. It was
the Braves.
It was Braves Mets, and that kind of we only got one of those games. We talked about the possible postponement, so that leads us kind of into talking about the doubleheader that happened today between the Braves and Mets, which caused absolute chaos because not only did it push the teams to have to play in two games the day before they're supposed to start the wild card series tomorrow, and messed up all of the pitching matchups and everything in that aspect. But it's also like 3 different places, 3 games, 3 days. Like it's going to be pretty difficult. But let's kind of start with game 1 of that series real quick, and we'll kind of fly through these a little bit more so we can kind of get to the wild cards that. But game 1 was a decently pitched game until late in the game. It started off Tyler McGill versus Spencer Schwallenbach. Braves scored 2 in the bottom of the 3rd off Miguel with a Ozzie Albies homer, righty off righty, which that's pretty notable for Albies, who usually hits lefty against righties. And then Ramon Laureano hit a solo homer off of Miguel in the 6th inning as well. And then that wrapped up the scoring until the wild 8th inning, where Francisco Alvarez doubled to bring home Tyrone Taylor, and then Francisco Lindor singled. Jose Iglesias also singled to tie the game, and then Vientos hit a sac fly. Nimmo homered, which basically gave them a 6th-run 8th inning to make it 6-3 at that point. And you're like 6-3, 2 innings left, like kind of feeling good if you're a Mets fan at that point. Well, then the Braves immediately score 4 in the 8th inning to come right back off of Kelenic single, Albies double to score 3 there, and then gave the Braves the lead heading into the 9th inning, where MVP runner-up Francisco Lindor then hit a go-ahead homer. See what I did there? To give the Mets back an 8-7 lead, and then they ended up closing that one out to win 8-7 there to take the first game of that doubleheader. And then leading into game 2, real quick, we thought we were going to have Chris Sale pitching that game. He ended up getting scratched before the game, and they ended up throwing
Grant Holmes.
I was going to say pseudo bullpen game, Grant Holmes. The Mets they were already locked into the playoffs, so they kind of just threw Joey Lucchesi out there to give up innings because that first game was so absolutely wild. Grant Holmes did really well, though. I think what was 4 perfect innings almost, or 3 perfect innings, and then into the 4th he gave up a hit. But Gio Urshela scored in the bottom of the 2nd on a he singled home Jorge Soler to give them the lead there, and I mean they ended up going on from there 3-0, winning from that point. But that was just a quick wrap up there. But Matt, I know you were in and out of it more and watching every pitch more than I was. So what was the emotions going into that 8th inning of game 1 and then through game 2?
Yeah, well, first off, I want to shout out Spencer Schwellenbach. That was his second start against the Mets this week. He started that game on Tuesday as well, and he pitched 14 innings against the Mets, and he did not give up. He gave up 2 runs total. One today was an inherited run that scored. They sent him back out there to start the 8th inning, and he gave up a really good at bat to Tyrone Taylor, who had like a 12 pitch at bat, and he ended up, I think he either singled or doubled to start that inning. But but Spencer Schwellenbach was incredible. McGill was fine for the Mets. The Braves had some of the same issues they've had all year with just not being able to cash in, getting a lot of runners on base, runners in scoring position. That just, this season's just been one of just the constant, like, they just seem to not be able to put up good at bats and in these situations. But that was disappointing. And then the all hell broke loose in the 8th inning. He had a couple homers for the Braves. Ramon Laureano is another guy for the Braves that has been incredible. He's got like a 130 WRC plus for the Braves this year, and it's no longer a small sample size with him. He's been with the Braves since like June. So that's pretty crazy that he's just, after being basically cut by Cleveland. I mean, I'm sure Cleveland probably wishes they hadn't done that now. I mean, their outfield is better than it has been, but they still could use another quality bat in that outfield. But that was crazy. And then of course the 8th inning was wild. Top of the 8th, for the Braves, it was kind of a question on, do you want to put in you want to keep Schwellenbach out there, or do you want to put in who was only at like 80 pitches or something? Or do you want to put in Joe Jimenez, who has been really good this year? He's got like a 2.5 ERA. That the peripherals kind of back it up a little bit. Or do you want to go ahead and put Raisel Iglesias in to pitch 2 innings? Because he has done that some this year. And all your bullpen was very fresh today coming in. After yesterday, they trailed the whole game basically, so they didn't really burn any of their top guys. So they ended up putting in Joe Jimenez after Schwellenbach gave up that leadoff double, and Joe Jimenez just didn't have it today, and it's unfortunate. It's a bad timing for that to happen. Well, let me rephrase that. He didn't have it in game 1 today. And then they brought in Raisel Iglesias, who's been the second best reliever in baseball this year behind Clase. He's been incredible. He's got like a 1.3, or coming into today had like a 1.3 ERA, and he gave up the sac fly that took the lead. He had the hit. I think Jimenez was charged with 3 runs, and then Iglesias was charged with 3 runs because he gave the homer to Nimmo. So 6-3. I was like, I'd had it with that, because you just felt like with the Braves bullpen the way they are and have been all year, that they would be in really good shape there in the 8th and 9th inning to not give up 3 runs. You feel like, oh, they might hit a solo homer or something, and I just knew Lindor was going to do something too, because he always seems to do something against the Braves. So Braves come back and have a little bit of good luck, because for some reason the Mets went to, I don't even remember who they went to start the inning. One of their decent relief, it might have been, was it
Maton?
It was Maton. Yeah, I think it was Maton. They brought in Maton to start the 8th inning, and he hit Eli White, who was inexplicably I guess it wasn't totally inexplicable with a 3-run lead in the 8th inning, but this year, the Snitker has been very aggressive on taking Jorge Soler out of games early, which is for good reason, because Jorge Soler is a horrible defender. But when his spot's about to be due up in the lineup, it kind of makes it a little bit of a bigger question because of the drop-off from him to Eli White. Well, Eli White got hit by a pitch, so he got on base, and then they had a walk, and got to 2 outs. Then Jared Kelenic, who is a former Mets prospect who was traded for the guy he was facing, Edwin Diaz, who came in the game when the bases were loaded, or there was 2 on with 2 out, and Edwin Diaz, or 1 out or something, when Edwin Diaz came in, and Kelenic singled on a play that Edwin Diaz just didn't cover the bag. Like, it would have been an out. He just didn't cover the bag, and then Michael Harris walked or something, and then Ozzy Albies hit a 3-run double, which was absolutely crazy. Ozzy Albies hitting right against right for the first time in his career this week. He went in game 1 today. He went 3 for 4 with a walk and a homer and the 2-run double that hit off the top of the wall too. It was almost a homer. He almost hit a grand slam. So what a crazy game for him. But top of the ninth, the Braves had burned up Iglesias already, and they put in Pierce Johnson and gave up the homer to Lindor, which was the most predictable thing to ever happen. Braves couldn't counter in the bottom of the ninth. It was just a wild game. I've never seen anything like it. Game 2 was started by Grant Holmes, like you said. He's been good for the Braves this year too. He's a 30-year-old rookie, so it's not ideal, but they were able to get it done. The Mets had their B lineup in there. They, for whatever reason, just couldn't hit Lucchesi. They got 1 run off of him, but they were able to add on in the 8th inning with Marcell Ozuna had a nice 2-run single with 2 outs, and I think it was actually the bottom of the 7th. And the Braves were able to use they did have to use Jimenez and Iglesias again in game 2, which was disappointing because you would think with the pitchers the Mets threw out there that the Braves would be able to not have to use those 2 guys again. They might be able to get up 6 or 7 runs and then maybe throw Jesse Chavez or Luke Jackson or somebody. So a couple other notes in the game 2, Ronaldo Lopez pitched an inning out of the bullpen, which was interesting. He pitched on Saturday. So I guess he'll be ready for possible game 3, because this would kind of be a side day anyways, I guess. But definitely an interesting thing there. And then the Mets also used 2 relievers that pitched game 1. They used Ottavino and Huascar Rosaban again, which I thought was really interesting that they would use both of those guys twice. It might signify whether those guys are going to be on the postseason roster or not. So I thought that was really interesting too. But both teams ended up doing what we expected. I think we expected this to get split today because whoever wins game 1 rests their guys game 2. One team's got urgency, one team doesn't. It's unfortunate for the Diamondbacks that it came down to this, because if this series had happened earlier in the week, the outcome might have been different and the Diamondbacks might have gotten in. But it's not fair to any of the 3 teams, because, in the Braves and Mets case, having to play this 2 games today. I mean, the Braves clinch. They have to travel to San Diego now, which we'll talk about in a little while, with a depleted pitching staff. So, and the Mets have to travel to Milwaukee, and they actually play an early game tomorrow. I think it's the 3:00 game or something. So, they had to throw Edwin Diaz through like 40 pitches in today's game. So, it's not a great situation for either team going into the wild card, but both teams did what they had to do today to get in. That's kind of the most important thing.
David, any thoughts?
We let Matt go. Obviously, that's the game for his team to get into the playoffs. That's maybe he'll have the best takes, especially when it comes to the Braves. But watching Edwin Diaz come out there in the 9th.
Oh yeah,
after he gives up the go ahead homer. Or it wasn't a homer, it was a double by Albies, but he gives it up and comes out there in the 9th and shuts down the Braves. He gives up a hit. He waves the manager off. He's like, no, I got this, and then strikes out. Who was that? He got Garneau to ground out, and he struck out whoever was before him.
So Laureano was the guy before him, and Laureano actually hit a ball that was about 6 inches from being a double down the line, and then he struck out after a 6 or so pitch at bat. But yeah, I agree with you, David. That was pretty remarkable, and it kind of shows the type of guy Edwin Diaz is when he's in a good situation, he's healthy and everything. He's a guy that wants the ball in those situations. We just haven't seen him in those situations all that often in crucial games because he's played for the Mets and Mariners. But we might be seeing him in the next few days in some of those situations again.
Yeah, and
I don't know if you're going to see him in the next few days. He's threw 26 pitches yesterday, and he threw 40 something pitches today.
You'll probably see him. I bet you see him. You'll see him in one of the 2 games, next 2 games. I don't know if they'll probably try to stay away from him tomorrow, but I mean,
I'll tell you what I expect. I was gonna say, I tell you what I expect is pitcher usage. What we're seeing the trend for as we kind of transition from this Braves Mets series into the expected postseason series is I expect and with one of the announcements is that Yu Darvish is going to be available out of the bullpen for the Padres. You have to use your pitchers, and the pitchers have to be ready to have a higher workload and come out and still be effective, even on short rest, on no rest, on 2 times in a day. Like, it doesn't matter where, when the pitching happens, you've got to make it to the next round. You got to keep pitching, so you can rest up all winter. I think teams have been a little timid when it comes to the usage, but we've seen it trend the other way in recent years. Just as in terms of like John Lester pitched in the World Series for the Cubs, right? Chris Sale came out of the bullpen, pitched in the World Series for the Red Sox. Max Scherzer pitched in, for the Nationals. Like, we've seen it a good bit recently, trending towards, look, it doesn't matter what your usage is in the playoffs. I think we're going to see a ton of the Edwin Diaz, we're going to see a ton of Emmanuel Clase this postseason, where he might pitch 3 innings in multiple games to close it out, because he's the best pitcher that they're going to be able to throw. And if you can do that 3 times and win 3 of your games, you only have to get through one other win without Emmanuel Clase. If you can get him 2 or 3 innings in every game, it doesn't matter whether his arm is healthy next season or not, if you can win the World Series. So in terms of Edwin Diaz specifically, like I was very impressed with his attitude as a closer, and then I was very impressed with the result that he got, especially against Lindor, Laureano. That slider was biting 98 mile an hour up in the zone. That was a tough inning. And for a guy who had already given up the go-ahead run, now to go in and get the save, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so let's transition to talking about the wild card series now. Let's start with the first series. We'll just go in order of how they're going to happen time-wise. I think it makes the most sense. So the first series is going to be the Astros and the Tigers. So the game 1 is going to be Tarik Skubal against Framber Valdez. We're not really sure what the rest of the pitching matchups are going to look like there. But Tigers traveling to Houston, they've been a team that they've surprised a little bit, especially late in the season. I mean, at one point they were like 0.01% playoff odds. They've had this insane streak here. AJ Hinch, the Tigers manager, himself said today it's going to be Tarik Skubal in game 1, and then absolute chaos behind that. So we don't know. It might be like Casey Mize, Reese Olson, Tyler Holton, like bullpen games most likely, kind of like what David's talking about. Usage is going to be kind of weird there. And then it's going to be interesting to see where the Astros go. You would assume Hunter Brown probably gets one of those games. And then after that, it's going to be, who else there? Don't think it's going to be Verlander. He didn't look pretty good, or he didn't look good at all. He just pitched, I think, on Saturday as well. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go for their third game. But David, what do you think about this Tigers-Astros series? And then I guess give us what your prediction would be.
Yep. The Tigers are definitely underdogs in this series, right? Houston's been here every year. They've made it to the ALCS just about every year. It's a very well-constructed roster that can definitely get to the playoffs. But I don't know that they're going to have Yordan Alvarez is Houston. And at the very least, he might be limited. He might miss a game or 2 in here. That definitely helps Detroit. And Detroit's got the best pitcher in this series, right? They've got Tarik Skubal. We just talked about the weird usage. I would think Skubal's probably available to go game 3 out of the bullpen, right? If it comes down to that. And again, he's the best pitcher either team has. So, you'll see a lot of Josh Hader. You'll see a lot of Ryan Presley out of the bullpen for the Astros. I think this is going to be a surprising pitching heavy series, and I don't like Detroit's chances. But then again, there's just something about this Detroit team that they've marched all the way here. They've done it on the back of their guys, Riley Green, Tarik Skubal. They've gotten really good surprise performances out of guys like Matt Vierling and Kerry Carpenter. Kerry Carpenter at a 160 WRC plus this year. I think he'll be impactful in this series, presuming he's healthy. And maybe Spencer Torkelson has a coming out party, especially against Fernando Valdez. He'll have the platoon advantage there, and he's been a lot better since coming back from the minor leagues. So I'm excited to see what this little Detroit team can do. I think I'll go ahead and pick them. I want to see it. But then again, right, I'm acknowledging that I'm going with the team of destiny pick here as opposed to the logical pick, because I think logically Houston's got every advantage in this series. Got the better lineup. They got the Hall of Fame players. They got Altuve. They got Bregman. They've got Jordan. Like, I feel great about Houston making it very far in this playoffs, but but they're running into a team of destiny, and I always try to pick a team of destiny.
You can pick them to sweep or in 3?
3. No, 3. I'm going with what I said, that they win the Tariq Skubal game, lose game 2, and then Skubal comes in to close out game 3. That's my prediction, and it creates a scenario that's going to be very questionable. I also think Jackson Jobe will play a very important role in the Tigers winning this series if they do.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a super interesting series. This is such a weird matchup. The Astros have still slugged their way to success this year. You could just go up and down that lineup, and you're still looking at at Altuve, who had a great year. Bregman came back after a bad start. You look at Kyle Tucker was having a career year, got hurt for a while, and then he came back. And he's had he's been good in September, so he seems to be back. Jordan, we'll see what happens. Apparently, he took batting practice today, so we'll see if he's able to play. Obviously, being a DH, playing the field's not the end of the world if he can't do that. So he's been great. So you've got this great lineup, this experienced team. The pitching's not as good as I think it has been in past years, when you had a very good version of Verlander in past years. You had guys like Lance McCullers. Going back a few years, you had Garrett Cole, Garcia, Christian Javier. I think will be pitching, right? Or is he hurt?
I think he's hurt.
He's hurt. Yeah, for some reason that name popped up as one that I think I thought was hurt. It popped into my head as someone I thought was hurt. I just didn't remember, but yeah, their pitching's a little bit thin. The bullpen is good, but it's a little bit thin compared to what it has been. So definitely an interesting team there. And then the Tigers have been incredible with the starting pitching this year. Tariq Skubal, just what can be said about him? I mean, he's been unbelievable this year. You feel like you've got a good chance in any game he starts, and he will get to start that first game, as David was talking about. So you feel pretty good about having a chance to win that first game if you're the Tigers. But and the Tigers have been red hot, and they have a great bullpen, by the way, a deep bullpen. I just don't know. This is their first time there, and you've got guys like – I just don't know if I trust their offense. And I trust the Astros to maybe run into a homer off a Skubal or the bullpen, a couple of homers. They got such experienced, good playoff hitters. The Tigers, I just don't know if I trust their offense because it's not very deep at all. And you're trusting, guys who have had inconsistent seasons, although they've been hot lately. Torkelson's one. Torkelson has had a 125 WRC plus since August 1st, but on the year he's been pretty rough. So, do you trust him in the playoffs? I don't know. I mean, Riley Green, I feel like you could trust him, other than just it being his first playoff game, obviously. But it's going to be very interesting. And one other little variable, or I guess it's not really that much of a variable, but an interesting note is this is AJ Hinch versus the Astros.
Yeah.
I don't think we mentioned that, so that's interesting too. But it's gonna be a crazy series. I think I got to go with the Astros and their experience. But one other little thing to kind of think about: the Astros. There's a lot of pressure on the Astros to win this year because you've got guys hitting free agency, you've got guys aging out. You're looking at like Altuve's going to be a year older. Bregman's probably going to be gone in free agency. Maybe he signs another deal next year, but we'll see. I mean, you've got some of your bullpen arms are getting a year older. Presley, Hader. There's a lot of pressure on them to have a good postseason this year. It's one of their last shots, I think, to go to win a World Series with this current core. So it'll be interesting to see Kyle Tucker after next year's a free agent too, I believe. So we'll see. we'll see if that pressure affects them at all. But I kind of doubt it does. They've handled this so many times through the past several years. We'll see if the Astros get to go to yet another ALCS this year. They got to get through the Tigers, and it's going to be interesting. Games are in Houston, so obviously that's a good playoff environment. It has been for a long time. I got to go with the Astros.
Yeah, so I think another thing we should preference, because if you're a baseball fan, you most likely know it, but these are 3-game series, right? 3-game series, anything can happen. Like usually, if you get to a 5-game series or a 7-game series, the better team wins, right? But it's not hard to have a 3-game cold stretch and have the worst team win this one. So it's going to be interesting because I think Game 1's matchup, which we're talking about Tarik Skubal, like he's going to be the difference maker there, right? Which another thing I think a lot of people aren't realizing is that it's going to be Framber Valdez for the Astros. And that doesn't seem like a daunting matchup all that much, but it's when you look at the Tigers lineup where it really makes a lot of sense. They have Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter, Riley Green, Colt Keith, and Trey Sweeney, who are all lefties that play a major part of that team, right? The only righties they have is Matt Vierling, Spencer Torkelson, and Jake Rogers, who's their catcher. And then they have a switch hitter in Wencel Perez right now playing right field. And even if you want to talk about Jace Jung's a lefty, Zach McKinstry's a lefty who also plays those utility roles for them. Those are both primarily lefties, right? So I think that makes it incredibly, incredibly hard against the Astros when you're talking about Framber Valdez being the Game 1 starter. And that would almost make me assume that Yusei Kikuchi is going to be the Game 3 starter. I think you go Hunter Brown Game 2 and probably Yusei Kikuchi Game 3.
Be interesting.
Who's been really dynamite against lefties.
I wonder if Yusei Kikuchi might go Game 2.
He could. He very well could. I also wonder if maybe they try and go Game 2 if they win Game 1 with him and save Kikuchi for Game 3 or for Game 1 of the division series. But I think that plays a massive, massive role into it, right? Because Framber's pretty good against lefties himself, especially with the sinker and stuff he has. So I very much want to take the Tigers. Like I really like this team. I was really high on this team going into the year. I liked them a lot more than most people. I just think that having the 2 lefties for the Astros coming into this series as starters, that could help neutralize anything that this offense can do in Game 1. Even if you're going into a Tarik Skubal game who can neutralize the offense, for the Astros, I think that makes a lot of the difference, especially going down late. So I'm going to pick Houston, and Matt, I don't know if you said in 2 or 3.
I'll give it 3. I mean,
all right.
I don't know.
Then I'm going to be weird here, and I'm going to say Houston sweep.
Yeah,
I'm going to say they're going to take the first.
I will ask you, Damian, because I don't think it would change my answer. But if the Tigers still had Jack Flaherty, would that change your mind on this?
No.
Okay, I don't think it would change my mind either. But it'll be a lot closer for me.
It doesn't change my mind because of the fact that they got pieces from that. Like Trey Sweeney is their starting shortstop for the Tigers right now. He's part of the reason why they ended up getting here. And like, if you take the Jack Flaherty part out of it, like who's playing shortstop for this team? Because Trey Sweeney was really good and Javi Baez is still out. I don't think it matters enough, to be honest. So
it is also worth noting 2 quick things before we move on. One being they also traded away Mark Canha at the deadline, who is a righty, would be really useful against a Framber Valdez and a Yusei Kikuchi. And then on top of that, right, get down to the 9th inning, it's Josh Hader, another lefty. So going to be closing games for the Astros. So a lot of things working against the Tigers here. And I will say my picking of the Tigers is absolutely zero to do with anything remotely concrete and everything to do with vibe and feel, because the logic says this is a Houston series for sure.
It says nothing to do with logical thoughts here. It's all vibes, totally.
Yeah, but like you mentioned, logic you can throw out the window in these 3-game series.
Yeah,
like, it's just whatever randomness happens is what happens. It's baseball.
Exactly. Okay, so let's go to talking about our next series now, and that is the Royals and Orioles. It's going to be in Baltimore. Game one matchup is going to be quite a pitching matchup between Cole Reagans and Corbin Burns. Game two, the Royals are the only ones that have really announced their full rotation outside of the Padres too. Game two is going to be Seth Lugo, and then game three will be Michael Waka. You would assume for the Orioles that Zach Eflin would get probably game two, and then game three they might go with more of a kind of a impromptu bullpen game, Dean Kramer, and then kind of out from there. But two-star shortstops here: Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr. So David, or I guess David, what do you think is going to be the key for this Royals Orioles series, and what's your prediction?
Well, the key, I think, is the Orioles pitching, because the Orioles definitely have the weaker pitching staff here in the whole. The Royals picking up Lucas Urseg at the deadline. The Cole Reagans has kind of developed into an ace. I'm actually really excited to try and tune into this series. I think if Cole Reagans come out and shut down this Orioles lineup, I am very intrigued by the Orioles or the Royals' chance to win this series. Now, I think the Orioles have a better offense. I think there's kind of no doubt about that. The Royals are kind of Bobby Witt and then his buddies. And the Orioles have a very complete offense full of a lot of dangerous hitters, right? I mean, Anthony Santander at 44 home runs this year, Gunnar Henderson, Colton Cowser, Adley Rutschman. Like, you have a lot of really good hitters in this Orioles lineup. But my goodness, do I like this. If Cole Reagans can put together a really good coming out party, I am an ace type of performance in game one, I think the Royals can win this series. But it is entirely reliant on whether Cole Reagans comes out and looks like a second-year player or a long-standing, like, ace-level pitcher. And we'll know a whole lot about the Royals' future with that kind of performance, and we'll also know a whole lot about Corbin Burns and his free agency. I think with this playoff set, he's guaranteed one playoff start here. What better way to make your money than on the biggest stages? Corbin Burns has to come out here and match Cole Reagans head to head against two really good lineups. I'm the pitching matchup in game one it's probably the best pitching matchup of any of them. Like, Valdez and Skubal is really exciting, but this one has so many layers to it that I'm really intrigued. Obviously, like, Cole Reagans got traded away from the Rangers last year, who won the World Series. Like, he would have gotten a World Series ring last year, and now he's the ace pitcher for the Royals. Like, this pitching matchup, game one, I feel like whoever wins game one wins the series. Game one is so important here because it's the two best pitchers, maybe the two best pitchers pitching tomorrow too. Like, again, Skubal is there, but that's just going to be an electric matchup. I really want to see Corbin Burns come out and strike out like 10 or 12, because if that's the case, Corbin Burns is getting like 300 million. But if not, I think the Boris is going to have a lot tougher time selling people on it, especially if Burns gets whacked around a little bit by an okay Royals lineup that isn't super scary, with the exception of Bobby Witt, who is an incredible baseball player. For my pick, I'm picking the winner of game one. I will say that I think the Royals get it done and beat the Orioles. And I just decided that. I was swapping back and forth while I was talking about it.
Yeah, well, I just watched the Royals play this weekend, and obviously one of the games wasn't that big of a deal for them because they'd clinched on Saturday, I believe. But I think for the Royals, I think that the Orioles, especially in a short series where you do have the one game that will be pitched by Corbin Burns, who is still very, very good. You start to worry about the Orioles' depth in their pitching, rotation and bullpen. I mean, they've had so many injuries in their rotation with Rodriguez and Bradish missing time, and I think that, but in the short series, you got one game that you feel really good about your starter, regardless. So if you're the Orioles, I trust their offense. I don't trust the Royals offense at all, and really. I don't. They've got Bobby Witt Jr. and I mean, other than that, though, their offense is pretty barren right now. I mean, they've really struggled to hit this weekend. Salvador Perez is still pretty good. Now he's a postseason hero. I mean, he was a World Series MVP. I think people forget that he was on that team and just that he's been there that long. So this has been one of the worst teams in baseball ever since their World Series win, and he's back in the postseason for the first time since. So that's good. That's good for him. But I think if you're picking this series, I just don't trust the Royals offense, and especially the missing Vinny Pasquantino hurts them too. I just don't trust their offense really, and their pitching is good, but I don't know if I trust their bullpen that much. I mean, Cole Reagans is awesome. Lugo and Waka have had good seasons. They're solid pitchers, but they're not necessarily dominant. I think they'll struggle to just shut down an Orioles team that has so many of these stars in their lineup: Henderson and Rutschman and Santander, and all these guys. Westberg is back now. He's good. I mean, they've got so many guys. So they were in it last year. They got to get a taste of it last year. It's in Baltimore. That place is always electric in postseason atmospheres. I've got to go with the Orioles for this game. I think they're gonna, or this series. I think they're gonna win the series. I know Damien's gonna ask. I'm gonna say 3 games for this one as well. I think it will take a third game.
I'll just keep mine pretty short and simple. I'm taking the Royals because they signed Will Smith this last offseason, and he goes to the World Series every single year.
Very true.
That was going to be my other point.
But really, and Matt, you mentioned it with Vinny Pasquantino. There's a chance he plays.
They were talking about that as if he was going to come back sometime in the postseason, possibly. I didn't think it was for the wild card, but is he possibly going to play in the wild card series?
He took batting practice the other day.
Okay.
I guess this weekend, and apparently felt pretty good. So he fractured his thumb on September or August 29th. So it has been about a month. It was a 4 to 6 week timetable. So there's a chance he's on the wild card roster. And I think if anything, you just put him on, and even if he's in the lineup, it's like another guy. Hey, at that point, as long as he can play, as long as he can field, I guess. But I think overall, what it really, really scares me too is the Baltimore bullpen. It's we talked about them DFAing Craig Kimbrell. That's a here and there, whatever. But Yenier Cano has not looked good late in the season. Sionel Perez, who's going to be probably their top lefty, and I don't trust Gregory Soto in the playoffs either. And Sir Anthony Dominguez, he can be wild at times too. I just don't trust a lot of these guys in the bullpen for the Orioles. There, you can get good starts from Corbin Burns, who even himself he's given up. He hasn't had many scoreless starts this year. He still gives up a run or two. So if you get a run or two against him, and Reagans is able to shut the door on the Orioles, which it's going to be tough. I mean, they have a lot of good hitters. It's in Baltimore, like you mentioned. That place is going to be rocking. But I don't trust the Orioles bullpen late in games, and we see it time and time again in the playoffs. You can have dynamite starting pitching, but you better have good back end of the bullpen guys, because it doesn't matter what those starting pitchers do. This isn't the regular season. The starting pitchers don't go 7-8 innings very often in postseason games. They get pulled 5th inning, 6th inning. So I just think if Pasquantino's able to play in there, it just adds a little extra dynamic to it. And the Royals, we talk about Bobby Witt. They do have a couple guys who are like playoff performers, I guess, per se. You don't think of them normally as that, but when it gets to the playoffs, Tommy Pham always finds a way to make an impact whenever he's on a playoff team. Robbie Grossman, he finds himself in the playoffs every single year and does really well. These guys just find a way to do it. Adam Frazier, he's not a household name, but he puts up consistent at-bats in the playoffs. And you talked about Salvador Perez and Bobby Witt. Like, obviously, they're going to make their thing. They also have Yuli Gurriel, who's also a known playoff performer. Like, he's not done much this year, but you just never know. So I'm going to take the Royals here. I'll say it's going to be in 3. I think it's going to be a close series, but I'm just going to. I think the Orioles are obviously the better team, but I just think this is kind of like what David was talking about in with the Tiger series. I just feel the vibe of the Royals. Like, this is a team that I really liked coming into the year as well. I think they're going to be able to pull it off.
I know I didn't say, but I'm Royals in 2 based on the strength of that first game, where I think the Royals win game 1, deflates the Orioles, young team again, first kind of second trip to the playoffs. But I think this is a team both teams are kind of on the downward trend going into this playoffs. I just note that Seth Lugo as the number 2 starter, he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball this year. I really like Seth Lugo, and I like him more than Eflin, I think, right now. And that gives me a 2-game set there. So I'm going Royals in 2.
Interesting. Okay, so let's jump over to our next series, which is the Mets that played today against the Milwaukee Brewers. It's going to be in Milwaukee here. Sounds like it's going to be Luis Severino probably for game 1 versus Freddie Peralta. I'm not sure we know much else outside of that. We were talking before the show with the Brewers pitching matchups. It might be probably Tobias Myers or Frankie Montas, Aaron Savale, somewhere in there. And then for the Mets, who knows right now because of having to play the 2 games today. It took Tyler McGill out of it. David Peterson had pitched the day before that. Probably, I would assume, Jose Quintana. I guess he'd even be on short rest because I think he pitched Friday, I want to say. So it would probably be that, and then game 3 would probably be some weird part there. But Matt, what do you think about the Mets going into Milwaukee here for the postseason?
Yeah, so this is going to be a very interesting matchup. I think that you look at this series as just the Brewers are so weird. It feels hard to trust the Brewers this year. The names on that roster, just aren't there quite yet. I mean, and they're missing Christian Yelich. I mean, the pitching, they lost Corbin Burns. They traded him in the offseason. But the team's just been there. They've just been good all year. They won the Central. They almost got the bye. I mean, they were right there with the Dodgers and the Phillies record-wise at the end of the season. They've had a good bounce back from Willy Adames. William Contreras has proven that last year wasn't a fluke. He's the real deal. Still disappointed the Braves traded him. So, Jackson Churio started off fine and then just exploded in the second half. He put up 4 WAR this year, by the way, as a 20-year-old. That's pretty cool. And then you've got just their lineups. They've just got a lot of good players. I mean, you look down, they're deep. They're very deep. They've got, I believe, like 10 players with over 1.5 WAR this year. And then the pitching's been good. I mean, Freddie Peralta has been very solid, as you would expect him to be. Tobias Myers, as you mentioned, has been good. Trevor McGill has been really good out of their bullpen. The bullpen's still good. Hobie Milner's been fine. Jared Koenig's been really good. And then you still got Devin Williams, who missed a good portion of the season with those injuries. Well, since he's come back, that injury has not affected him long term. He's been just as good as he always has been. He's got a 1.25 ERA on the season. So you look at this team, and I like this team. The Mets are in an interesting spot coming into the series. I do think their pitching lineup is going to work out okay. You're going to start Severino in game 1. I do believe Manaea can go on Wednesday. He pitched last on Friday. And he's really been their second best pitcher this year behind Severino. It's really been 1A, 1B with those 2 guys too. And then Quintana could probably go on Thursday. They probably won't have Peterson or Tyler McGill, who pitched today. But Tyler McGill is a guy who's come out of the bullpen at times in his career too. That could end up being a factor on Thursday. But Yeah, I mean, and just some interesting notes on those games today. That the Mets did have two guys throw multiple innings, or multiple both in both games. Huascar Brosabon um and Jose Quintana. I mean, not
Ottavino.
Ottavino threw two innings, or two games, and then Edwin Diaz threw the two innings or the 1 2/3 innings, but he threw like 40 pitches after throwing 30 pitches yesterday. So, which was an interesting decision by the Mets to pitch him yesterday in a game that was like 6-0. So that was the Mets pitching situation is definitely better since they won game one today. They didn't have to throw all their guys in both games, but it's still not great. They're traveling to Milwaukee. It's another real interesting thing. They just played Milwaukee this weekend for 3 games.
Yeah.
Like the Friday through Sunday, they played in Milwaukee. They're now going right back. So I think I got to take the Brewers. I think the Mets are probably a little bit worn out just from all this craziness, and I wouldn't sleep on the Mets though in this series. The Mets offense is good. Lindor has been a clutch playoff performer in the past, and there's something about their team that feels very. They feel like they're just. They definitely feel like a team that has played together really well this year. They just seem to have that like intensity in these games and confidence and finding ways to win games. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Mets won this one, but just because of the situation, having to travel and all, I think I got to go with the Brewers. The Brewers really need to win this series though. After last year, what happened to them, and they've had a lot of one and done playoff appearances over the last few years. So we'll see what happens, but I'm definitely on board with the I'm definitely on with the Brewers, and I think it's going to be 3 games here.
Yeah, I've doubted the Mets all season. To Matt's point, right? These are two teams that are very confusing. The Brewers have I think, slight advantage in that they've won a lot more games this year, but I'm sitting here going, I did not trust the Mets at all season. They went and made the playoffs with a patchwork rotation consisting of a somewhat fixed Luis Severino and Jose Quintana and one start from Kodai Senga. And the bullpen is a bunch of guys who are either older or somewhat cast-offs. But it's funny because the Brewers are constructed the same way. They've got a bunch of cast-offs and older guys and, guys who've just not been, able to find their footing in other organizations. This Brewers. I picked this Brewers team to finish last in the division because I just thought it was going to collapse, and they just went out and proved everybody wrong. Stomped the division, stomped the NL Central. At this point, I'm just kind of thinking like, who's the X factor in this series, right? It's probably Jackson Chourio. A 20-year-old being able to either light up the big stage or maybe succumb to the pressure a little bit in his first experience in the playoffs. That's probably my pick to be like the guy that kind of this whole series revolves around. But the Brewers have a couple of guys like that, right? Willie Adames is a free agent after the season, just put up a 4-WAR season, 30 home runs at shortstop with good defense. Like, what better way to cement your case for $200 million plus in your contract than to go out here and hit some home runs in the playoffs? So I think the Brewers have a little bit more at play, and the Mets are kind of like happy to be here. But then again, right? Like, that was a total team effort today that we saw by the Mets against the Braves in Game 1 that, I don't think you can discount. But like Matt said, I think the travel logistics are going to be tough. The pitching matchups are not going to favor the Mets. I'll go with the Brewers. I'm going to go with them in 3, and I am going to say, like, I think this is where Jackson Chourio is a bit of a coming out party. I think Willie Adames has some big impact on this series, and Devin Williams gets more innings than you're thinking, and locks it down.
Yeah, so I just went back to look because I wanted to kind of see, since they did just play this weekend in Milwaukee, what happened. The Brewers took 2 of 3 there. Manaea pitched the first game on Friday, 3 2/3 gave up 6 runs. So Montas pitched that game for the Brewers, 4 innings, 2 runs there, and then they went to like Joe Ross and from there. Then you look at the next one. Jose Quintana pitched 4 1/3, gave up 2 runs in that game, and the Brewers went with Tobias Myers in a bullpen game. They did opener, and then Tobias Myers, who went 4 scoreless innings, only giving up 1 hit from that point. And then Sunday was David Peterson versus Colin Rea, who probably not neither one of those are going to factor in here. And that's the one game that the Mets won 5-0.
Yeah, and I think the Brewers rested a lot of their key players on Sunday too. I don't think they had everyone in their lineup.
Turang, Churio, Adames were in there. But other than that, yeah, I mean Joey Ortiz technically too, but they did rest some other guys.
Yeah.
So just noting that the Manaya and Quintana, who were probably going to be 2 factors in this thing, just did face the Brewers in Milwaukee, and they lost both of those games. The Brewers got to both of those pitchers there. Now they're probably going to be game 2 and 3, so they can set something up with Severino in game 1 if they're able to win that one. But this, I think going to Milwaukee is actually probably the best case for the Mets here. Going to a place you just were, like playing a team you just played, even though it's back in the place where you just lost 2 of 3 like 2 days ago or whatever. Sometimes you see the teams get fired up for that game, right? We saw the Mets have the resiliency today. Like they could have easily fumbled it today in that first game. They came back to win it. I think they're going to be resilient. But the Brewers kind of just feel a lot like how the Rays always feel when they get to the playoffs, right? Like they don't ever feel like they have the better team, but yet at the same point, like, they're going to win a series or 2 in the playoffs. Like it just feels that way again here. I think Churio stepping up is going to be huge for them. Adames, he's been that massive part. He's going to free agency. Rhys Hoskins, he's been a playoff performer. He's hit some big homers before as well. So I think I'm going to go the Brewers as well here. Not having Christian Yelich obviously is a big factor here. Like if he was in this, I think you hit the Brewers, no doubt. I think the Mets might still have a chance, but I'm going to go Brewers in 3. I think the Mets probably steal the first game with Severino, come off that high from that point. They beat Peralta. They're going to feel really good. And then I think they end up getting to Manaya and Quintana in the last 2 games. And I think the Brewers take it in 3. So let's talk about the last series here with the Braves and Padres. So what we know is Matt thinks the Braves are going to win, so we don't need to even talk to him. We just go directly to David. No, but in all seriousness, this is going to be another series here where we're talking about what are the pitching matchups going to be like, right? We know Michael King is going to go game 1 for the Padres. We know Joe Musgrove's going game 2, and Dylan Cease is going to go game 3. David also mentioned earlier, Yu Darvish is going to be coming out of the bullpen here potentially. So we know they have 3 of their top pitchers set up there. The Braves, we assume it's going to be Fried is going to pitch sometime, and then maybe Ronaldo Lopez for game 3. Game 1, we really don't know. There's a whole bunch of different ways, and that's because we are saying that Chris Sale for Brian Snitker is not going to pitch in the wild card series at all. Yeah. So, Matt, obviously you're going to know a lot about what the Braves have here as far as pitching wise in game 1. So what do you think where they'll go in that direction there? And then obviously what is your prediction?
Yeah. So, Snitker did say that he didn't expect Sale to be available, and I don't know if that means Sale might feel better and pitch an inning or 2 out of the bullpen at some point. He's going to stay on the roster, I think. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it sounds like he's been close to pitching, and that we're just not 100% sure what that's going to look like. The options tomorrow, according to the Braves beat people, are Ian Anderson, who has not pitched in the big leagues this year, but has a lot of postseason experience, was really a postseason hero in 2021. And he really he won a huge game in that World Series. He's one option. He really struggled when he first came back from his Tommy John in AAA and his rehab, but he got a lot better in September. So it'll be interesting to see if they go with him. He's got the experience. AJ Smith-Shawver, who has shown some good stuff this year at times. He's dealt with some injuries too. We'll look at him. Look into him as well. I just don't know. He was on the postseason roster last year, and he did pitch in the postseason last year. The other option is Bryce Elder, who I'll be surprised if it's Bryce Elder. I think they've seen enough of what they want to see from him. He got absolutely obliterated in the playoff game last year. I just don't trust him going on the road and keeping you in the game. I think there's a better chance that Ian Anderson keeps you in the game, even though if he hadn't pitched in the big leagues this year. So definitely going to be interesting pitching wise for the Braves. Of course, you've also got the matter of the relievers. I mean, Raisel Iglesias pitched in 2 games today. Joe Jimenez pitched in 2 games today. So if you do find a way to keep that game close late in the game, you've still got to worry about like how are you going to manage your bullpen because you had to throw so many guys the last 2 days. And now if you do win game 1, you get Fried and then Ronaldo Lopez. Fried would be on regular rest, and Ronaldo Lopez pitched 1 inning today, but I think he would probably be fine to pitch game 3. So if you can make it through to game 2 with a win, you feel pretty good about your chances. But I just don't trust, the Padres. On the other hand, they're rested up. They've known where they were going to be for a while, and they've got their pitching lined up right. And I just don't trust. In recent years, I would trust the Braves offense to win games in this series. I do not trust the Braves to win unless their pitching gives them a shutout, basically, or gives up 1 or 2 runs. Every game the Braves have won this year down the stretch has been 3-2, 2-1. They're winning these low-scoring close games because the rotation has been so good down the stretch this year that they've been able to keep winning, although the offense has been one of the worst in baseball. And now you throw that rotation question in there about who's even going to be available to pitch, plus the bullpen, who has been fantastic all year. Now you ask who's going to be available game 1, how rested are they, and you just had your 2 best relievers blow up in a game today that was a must-win game. So that's a big deal, and I don't know. I'll be surprised if the Braves are able to win a game in this series. Honestly, I'll really be surprised. It feels like they've just fought tooth and nail to win that second game today against the Mets AAA lineup, and they seem to just kind of not be in it. They seem to be a little bit of head case right now. So I'll be surprised if they win a game here. But hey, I'll be pulling for them. I'll be pulling for them down to the last out. If they do win, then me and Damien will have an interesting week because they would be the winner of this will play the Dodgers. Of course, the Braves. There's no way in hell the Braves are beating the Dodgers this year. But hey, that's a big postseason rivalry we've seen a bunch in recent years. So that'd be cool. And if that does happen, then at least one team won't be choking in the NLDS this year. So it would save one of us from embarrassment yet again. But yeah, I'm going to take the Padres in 2.
Yeah, I mostly echo that. I think what I'm most concerned with here is, is this finally Manny Machado's time to go out and get himself a World Series? Because it starts now. He's 33, and we're looking at a Hall of Fame career. Like Manny Machado is probably going to be one of the best third basemen that's ever played when it's all said and done. If he keeps up the kind of pace he's on, he hit 29 more homers this year, like another 3.5 WAR. Like he's already at 53 WAR. No, sorry, he's not 33. He's 31. Yeah, Manny Machado's got a ton more time to do really good things, but this is one of his better. This group is some of his best chances. This Padres team, and they made it as far as the NLCS a couple years ago. So, I'm focused on that. And the Padres have some just really exciting young players. Jackson Merrill, super exciting. Fernando Tatis Jr., super exciting. Like in terms of, and the Braves' exciting players are not going to be available, right? And that's, I think, the biggest gap here is if this is a Braves team at full strength, I think I'm leaning Braves. This is very clearly a crippled Braves team at a point at which, they were barely into the playoffs. They're in a terrible situation with their game one starting pitching. I can't. What we were talking about vibes with the Tigers and the Royals, and I went back and checked. So I wanted to make sure that for both of the seasons, we haven't had 3 of like the upset seed winners. The last year it was 2 upsets, 2 favorites. This feels like the Phillies and Marlins of last year, where there's just an obvious winner. Last year was the Phillies are going to kill the Marlins. It just there's nothing else that's going to happen, and that's exactly what happened, especially at home. San Diego fans absolutely crazy down there. Going to be a huge atmosphere. I just had the Padres winning this in 2 games. I don't think it's even going to be that close.
Yeah. One other note to add to that prediction that I forgot to mention is that the Braves have hit lefties way better than righties, and the Braves are facing 3 righties in this series, and 3 righties who are tough on righties with, King and his big curveball sweeper, and then same thing for Musgrove, and then of course Dylan Cease is nasty against everybody. So that's been a big issue. You look at the Braves lineup, you got Soler and you got Ozuna and you got Albies hitting right-handed only right now, and you've got, your only 2 lefties are going to be Olsen and Michael Harris, who are going to actually play because they have not been. Kellenick's been on the bench for months now, so that's going to be tough for the Braves too.
Yeah. So as far as this one, I think that what the key is going to come down to is how well do the Braves handle game 1, and then are they able to steal game 2? Because I think game 2 is going to be their best chance for a win, right? Yeah. Because it's going to be Fried and it's going to be against Musgrove, who Musgrove has had shaky stuff throughout the year. He's looked better recently. But he seems like the guy that you might be able to touch up right now. Like Michael King is throwing the ball very, very well right now. I just got to see this team this last week. So I was able to see how King, Musgrove, and Cease, those were the 3 that faced the Dodgers. Cease looked incredible, but he had his walks. But that can pop up at any time. But Musgrove was the one that kind of looked the most, hittable, I should say. Dodgers missed some pitches against him. So it's really going to come down to, can they steal game 2? Because if they can steal game 2, then you go in at least with a fighter's chance against Cease, who, like I said, he could have a game where he walks people or whatever, and then you go in with Reynaldo Lopez, and whatever happens in a 1-game series happens at that point, basically, right? But it's really going to be about, can they steal that game 2? I think game 1, with everything going on, I think it just leans heavily towards the Padres. Like, King's throwing the ball really well. Then you're going into San Diego. You got that ruckus environment already. They also know that this is going to be the chance to where if they win this, they then move on to face the Dodgers, who is their rivals at the moment. So I think in all, I think San Diego ends up taking it in 3, but I think it really comes down to what game 2 is going to look like, because I think San Diego takes game 1 easily, and then game 2, what Fried shows up. Do you get the Max Fried that has shown up in playoffs before, or do you get the Max Fried that has battled his command at times, is injured a little bit, maybe dealing with blisters, or like there's 2 different Max Frieds. When he's on, and then when he's kind of dealing with a little something that people don't know about, he's pretty shaky. Yeah. Which Max Fried are you going to get at that point? Yeah. Well, so I think that part, but I think the Padres they're so set up right now. I mean, Tatis is back. Like you said, Merrill's good. Obviously, Machado's great. Cronenworth shows up in big moments. He's a playoff performer as well. And Xander Bogaerts, I mean, he's going to be fine in there. Their bench, I mean, they don't have much depth. I don't like their bench, really. You're talking about Kyle Higashioka, Elias Diaz, Nick Ahmed, Tyler Wade, David Peralta. Brandon Lockridge is really a pinch runner, but you don't need depth when you have that top 6 going into a lineup, So
Yeah, I was
So I
gonna
think
say.
the Padres.
Yeah, I agree, Damien. That's a good point, and that goes for all these series. The bench doesn't matter anymore. You got the DH, and I mean, you might have a situation where you have a platoon split guy in there at some point, but the bench doesn't even play a
Yeah.
role in anything anymore. It doesn't. You rarely see anybody, off the bench. So, um, that shouldn't affect the Padres or the
And
Braves
plus,
really.
the Padres bullpen, it's it's set up to be very nasty. Like
They're
they go
good.
Robert Suarez, Tanner Scott, Jason Adam, Jeremiah Estrada, and Adrian Morejon. That's really like the five-headed monster that they. I don't even think if you look at it, like they brought up Matt Waldron the other day, but going into the Dodgers series, like Brian Hoeing and Wandy Peralta hadn't pitched in like 5 days or 6 days going into that series because they just go to those top five all the
Oh
time,
yeah.
and they're not afraid to go to them. They will go to them 3 days in a row if they have to. So that's something that they can even shorten these games if any of those starters look any bit like they're worried about what's going on there. They can immediately just say, okay, well, we're going to put Jeremiah Estrada out there for 2. We're going to put Robert Suarez for 2. Like they're not, and they might go to the 5, and they're also not worried about having them go multiple innings at a time for any of those guys. So that plays another role into it because what we were talking about with the Orioles thing, the bullpen matters a lot here, and they probably have the best bullpen in all of the playoffs, I think. So, well, that will wrap up our playoff or wild card series prediction part of this. We do have a couple other things that we want to hit on real quick before we wrap up here. First off, being that right before we went live today, we got the notification that Pete Rose had passed away at the age of 83. Very controversial in himself, but he is an iconic player. Has 4,200 hits in his career. Hit for a 303 average. Say what you want about the person, but the baseball player Pete Rose is a legend of the game. So wanted to mention that. Anything you guys got any thoughts on or stories about Pete Rose real quick?
I don't have too many thoughts. I mean, there's plenty of stories out there, but I don't want
Right.
to repeat any of them. But I mean, just looking at him as a player, and he's one of those guys that he was a unique player who did things differently from a lot of other players. He was one of those like super hustle guys, and he was really one of those guys. Like if you asked a bunch of casual baseball fans, maybe just sports fans who are more football or basketball fans or something, ask them to name 10 historic baseball players, Pete Rose would be one of the ones they name. Now, as big baseball people, we probably don't believe in Pete Rose being as good as some of the guys that like Alex Rodriguez and Barry Bonds and some of these Babe Ruth obviously, but like some of these guys that more of the sabermetric type guys and stuff that a lot of the advanced stats like. And but if you ask 10, if you ask name 10 historic baseball players, your top 10 ever, a bunch of people would probably name Pete Rose. So he's he's an iconic player. All the controversy has been well documented in all kinds of different places. So definitely going to be. I'm sure that discussion will get brought up again in the off season about the Hall of Fame and whether he should be in or not. And it'll be interesting to see if a lot of times when you have somebody pass away, there's a little bit of a push to revisit things like that. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. But yeah, it's very sad to see anybody, pass away. Prayers to his family and friends, and um, so definitely a tough day for the Cincinnati Reds people, and obviously baseball lost an icon today, even if he was a controversial icon.
Yeah, we had a player get banned for gambling on games this very season. I just don't think there's any revisiting other than for nostalgic purposes, right?
Yeah.
I think this is a battle that's been fought for years, right? I mean, this is the guy who leads all of Major League Baseball in career hits, right? Like,
Yeah, and
if
and
there
it
was,
never getting passed on that too.
yeah, like there wasn't ever any point. He was never going to get in because he was suspended and ultimately removed from baseball permanently for betting on games. We've we've seen that same punishment being handed down this year. It's not something that's going to get undone, despite everybody knows, right? He was a Hall of Fame caliber player, has off the field issues aside from the gambling that go look up. Pete Rose, like Matt said, controversial player on the baseball field, one of the best. We hope he rests in peace, and that's about it. You guys know me, big Hall of Fame guy. Love talking about it. I don't think there's anything to talk about. We fought this
Yeah.
battle for years,
Well,
and
I'm with you.
it's it'll get talked about, like Matt said, but it's not something that I think is nothing's going to change here. And I think that's kind of my closing thought on that. The Pete Rose thing is, I don't think anything changes.
Yeah. And then I guess a couple other things that we already kind of had talked about and have known, but they became official this week is Skip Schumacher will not come back as the Marlins manager. And John Mozeliak will step down at the end of 2025. And Hein Bloom will take over the president of baseball operations role after that season. So we already kind of knew those were confirmed, or we already knew those were going to happen. We're just confirming that actually. But the last story we wanted to hit on is the Giants today announced that president of baseball operations Farhan Zaidi was let go from his position. And then they immediately basically announced that franchise icon Buster Posey is now going to be taking over the role of president of baseball operations. I think we all kind of got a little bit of an inkling of this, or that this was going to happen just a couple weeks ago when the whole Matt Chapman extension came out, because it was talked about that Farhan Zaidi and Scott Boras, who's Matt Chapman's agent, did not get anywhere really on their contract talks. They had kind of stalled, and the Giants ownership went to Buster Posey and said, hey, kind of have a meeting with Chapman, figure it out. They worked on the framework of it. They added in a no trade that Zaidi was never going to add in, and added some other stuff to the deal, and basically like took it to Zaidi and said, here's the deal, you're signing it. And Buster Posey was the main one behind that. So we kind of knew this was coming, but now it's official. So David, what are your thoughts on Buster Posey now being the president of baseball operations?
We need a longer episode for that.
Yeah.
I have a lot of thoughts. I'm excited. I'll try to boil it down because we're way over time. I'm excited. We're going to revisit this, especially once the playoffs conclude and we get into negotiations and stuff and free agents and all that. But I'm really excited to see how this goes, because I think there's now an open path to, career franchise type players being able to leave the playing field and almost immediately step into the front office. We've seen it with a couple of guys, right? Craig Breslow is now a president of baseball operations. Sam Folds up there in the mix as well. But those aren't really like top tier players. Like Buster Posey was an MVP, 3-time World Series champion, like one of the more like iconic players of the 2010s, which is when we were growing up and forming our baseball fandom. Like Buster Posey is kind of like one of those awesome guys that we always watched and knew about, and he kind of transformed the way catcher was played there in the 2010s to being not only a great defensive player but also being able to hit offensively for your entire season. And he retired maybe still on the top of his game. Like we talked about that too. So this is a cool thing. I think there's maybe some underlying stuff, right? We talked about that Matt Chapman deal a little bit. It's definitely player friendly. Buster Posey's probably going to be a player friendly president of baseball operations. That might mean San Francisco becomes a really attractive free agent destination, and they could change the landscape of how this offseason goes. So, like I said, I want to talk about this more. I'll try to stop it there, but I'm excited about this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is real interesting to me. I have never been a fan of former players, especially really good players that going straight into roles like this. I think a lot of times they, as David mentioned, they're very. I don't think they see any skepticism with certain players at times. I think there's times, especially with aging players. I think I've always been concerned that, like for example, you look at one of the guys that I don't think David mentioned him, but Chris Young is in Texas, and obviously they had signed Seager and Simeon the year before Chris Young took over, right? I believe that was the old GM that signed those two guys, and then Chris Young made the trade for veteran Scherzer and signed DeGrom and signed a bunch of these aging guys because he just, as a former player, you believe in players you think are really good, even if there might be reasons to be skeptical at the same time. So I think that there's a little bit of that hops in there. Now, this could be different. Buster Posey obviously knows how a World Series can be won. He did it 3 times as a player. He knows what a clubhouse that wins a World Series is like. And I think if he puts the correct people around him to help him and evaluate, scout, and everything, I think this could be very good. And as you mentioned, David, the whole like the big issue that the Giants have had. I mean, I don't think Farhan did that bad of a job. I think the issue is that nobody wanted to go play there. Free agents, the taxes are extremely high. There's concern about the city. There's a lot of free agents that don't want to play there. So, but when you bring in a guy like Buster Posey, he's been there, he's played there, and these players all know him and respect him. A lot of these younger players grew up like he was an idol to them. I mean, you look at a lot of these guys that are about to hit free agency, they didn't get into the big leagues until 2017, 2018. And you're looking at, Buster Posey had been there for 7 or 8 years. And, they were probably in college and high school looking up to Buster Posey when when he was a player. So, that relationship could be very helpful for them. But I just thought it was really interesting. And I honestly don't know that Farhan Zaidi really deserved to be fired here. I get the Giant situation, but it feels like ownership maybe rushed that a little bit with their rebuild, and they seem like they might have gotten a little bit snake bit in free agency with the Judge thing. Who they should have gone after Judge, and that's what they did, and they didn't get him. And then they've honestly, like this year, like I was pretty critical of their offseason because I didn't believe in the guys that they signed. But the Blake Snell and Matt Chapman signings were fantastic. I mean, they weren't great. I mean, both those guys played extremely well. Chapman got an extension, and Sell pitched well enough to opt out. I mean, he pitched great. So, I'm not a fan of firing Zaidi to hire somebody who's never done this before. Even though I respect Buster Posey, I think he's a great baseball guy. He's a fantastic player. Played a cerebral position too. It's not like he was a DH or something. Like he played a position that he has to know everything. And I'm definitely a fan of his, but I just don't know if this is the best option here. It's definitely a interesting one.
Yeah, this screams organizational differences. I mean, Farhan Zaidi wanted to commit to a rebuild years ago. Giants ownership would never let him. They always wanted to play the fringe game. He built some teams. I mean, he had the team that won 106 games that year, but it just seems that like they would never commit to fully winning, and they would never commit to a full rebuild. They just wanted to commit to kind of this middle ground, and it just didn't seem like either one of that was going to work. I mean, you mentioned he went after Judge, like he should have. He had a deal with Correa that just got nixed because of the injury concern there, But like even then, like we're talking about, he signed Snell, he signed Chapman, he signed Jung Ho Lee this year, who got injured like 4 games into the season or whatever. It was probably like 10 games into the season or something, but he got injured, missed the entire year. Like this team's not terribly constructed. It's a team that I think, at worst, it's a wild card contender team. But like you mentioned, players don't want to really go to San Francisco. People are worried about certain things there. But if there's anyone that's going to be able to get people to come to San Francisco, it's going to be Buster Posey. Career San Francisco Giant, guy loves the city, still stayed around it, stayed involved in the team. Like, if anyone's going to know how to get people to want to come and play for the Giants and what it's like when the Giants are successful and everything like that, it's going to be Buster Posey. And this ownership group, they're just going to ride with people that they believe in, right? Like, and they very much believe in Buster Posey as the franchise icon there. It is skeptical, but at the same time, it's like, if anyone is going to help turn the Giants around, it's got to be somebody who knows the ins and outs and the day-to-day, that has spent years inside that organization. And this isn't just like hey, like you were inside the organization as like a front office member, or you were inside the organization as a scout. Like this guy was a player. He was on the front lines as a player every single day. He's going to be able to relate to what they're going through. He's going to be able to relate to what the team needs at times. He's going to be just very player friendly in general, but he's also going to understand the ownership side and the city side of what people are going to need going there, right? Like Farhan Zaidi, he spent a lot of time in Oakland, and then he went to Los Angeles. Still totally different than San Francisco. Like Posey's going to have that experience, which I think is going to help them a lot. I'd like Buster Posey. I want him to do well, but I hope the Giants do absolutely terrible under his reign, because he's a good person, he's a good guy. I like what he stands for, and the work he has done outside of baseball. If you don't know that, go look it up for what he's done there. But yeah, I hope the Giants just still suck, because I'm a Dodger fan, obviously. But anyways, that will wrap up looking at the wild card series and everything that we have to do with that. Wild card series is Tuesday through Thursday. All of the games can be found on ABC, ESPN platforms. And Friday's an off day. NLDS will start on Saturday. So I think the plan is for us to come back Friday, do a kind of breakdown of wild card series, and then predict the division series. So be on the lookout. That probably same time. Sound right? Around 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Does that sound right, guys?
Just about.
Okay. So be on the lookout for that, and have fun watching these series, because they're going to be a lot of fun, and nothing beats playoff baseball in October. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys back here on Friday.